top stories. Police outline traffic changes in Bastère for CPL. Vaccine hesitancy among the homeless community in Jamaica. And Taliban issues new warning against extending evacuation deadline. Hello and welcome to the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Today is Wednesday, the 25th of August, 2021. I'm Jason Davis. Nationally, Sergeant Calvin Amory from the Traffic Department has outlined the traffic management plan for the duration of the Hero Caribbean Premier League or CPL tournament, which is slated to begin on Thursday. He was speaking during ZIZ Radio's On the Road program on Wednesday morning. As it relates to parking, he said persons will not be able to park in certain areas, namely Victoria Road and Lozak Road.
There will be no parking between on Victoria Road, on the eastern side of Victoria Road, between Bastère High and Lozak Road. Park range, there will be no parking between Bastère High and Lozak Road. That's on East Park Range. And Lozak Road, there will be no parking permitted between Victoria Road and Hart Street.
Sergeant Amory said traffic will also be flowing in one way for some areas, and he's asking motorists to proceed with caution and look out for the signs that indicate traffic changes.
Traffic will flow in one direction, going northwards along Victoria Road. So you'll only be allowed to come from the Amory Bakery direction, going upwards. Lozak Road, it's already a one-way. You're only allowed to go west. Traffic only allowed to go west, so that will be enforced. On NHC, there's a road that's just north of NHC. That is normally a two-way. Traffic will only be allowed to go eastwards, so you'll only be allowed to come from the park and go out towards Wellington Road. You'll not be allowed to come from that area. And Park Range, traffic would be only allowed to go southwards. You would only be allowed to come down Park Range. You will not be allowed to go up.
He noted that these traffic changes will be taking place 2 hours before match days. Stakeholders in the Ministry of Education participated in a virtual consultation session on Friday aimed at enlightening participants on Policy Goal 2 of the 2017-2021 Education Sector Plan. During the virtual session, Dr. Tricia Esdale, Senior Assistant Secretary in the Ministry of Education, gave an overview of the career pathway and continuing professional development framework for the teaching profession of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Beginning in 2018, the Ministry of Education would have focused a large part of its work on fulfilling policy goal number 2 within the sector strategy. And policy goal number 2 speaks specifically to strengthening the quality and relevance of education at all levels to improve learning outcomes. And that policy goal has 3 program areas, one of which is professionalizing the teaching force, which is why we're gathered here today. But also embedded and interrelated are 2 other program areas, which I know once you hear them, you will recognize this is really where our energy has been, and they are curriculum and assessment and quality relevant teaching and learning. And we've been working on these 3 program areas avidly because we recognize that these 3 program areas and their specific outcomes have the potential to transform the education system here in St. Kitts and Nevis.
She further stated that there are 2 other program areas in curriculum and assessment and quality relevant teaching and learning, as the ministry recognizes that these areas and their specific outcomes have the potential to transform the education system. Dr. Marcia Stewart from the Organization of American States Development Corporation Fund consulting team guided the consultation session.
The literature shows that there's a strong correlation between the quality of leadership and the quality of schools. So if SDG 4, of course, speaks specifically to the education system to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. And of course, in the sub goals of that, it speaks to the fact that you need to ensure qualified teachers within the system. So all of those were at the forefront of our minds as we worked on these programs.
Ministry of Education's Deputy Chief Education Officer Lisa Pestana said the consultation session is just another way in which the ministry is battling the various challenges faced by the teaching fraternity. Officials from the Department of Consumer Affairs will be featured on the government radio and TV program Working for You today at 1:30. The special guests will be Paul Quealy, Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs, and Trista Watley-Stennett, Senior Consumer Affairs Officer. The discussion will focus on disclosure of price for products and services, damaged goods sold to consumers, return of electrical goods, and false, misleading, or deceptive representation, among other pertinent issues addressed by the Consumer Protection Bill, which had its first reading in the National Assembly on the 5th of August. Working for You is carried live every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. on ZIZ Radio and participating radio stations. The program is also streamed live on the SKNIS Facebook page. We now move to news on the regional scene. In Jamaica, approximately 60 homeless people have received their first dose of the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine as the government tries to battle the increase in COVID-19 cases. As with the general population, there are doubts and conspiracy theories among the homeless community. More in this CVM Live News report.
It's a personal choice they themselves will also have to make. The homeless community is being encouraged to get vaccinated when the opportunity presents itself. The government last Thursday organized an inoculation exercise in Kingston for the homeless population that saw over 60 people receiving their first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine. They will be due for the next dose within 8 to 12 weeks. But our news team was reliably informed that the take-up was low. There are roughly 3,000 homeless people in Jamaica, majority of whom roam the streets of Kingston. We spoke to some of them who are less eager to get the jab.
The vaccines are no, you know. Because you can't style me with 10 grand and come take my life on a style. That one has 0% for my, that is not for my agenda. Yeah, out of my league totally.
If you know and notice and even listen, you don't see no street people have COVID. Not street people now have COVID. No, be top class people, don't.
To date, there has been no confirmed case of COVID-19 among the homeless population, but that could also mean that testing for the virus among the homeless population is minimal, if any at all. The government maintains that widespread acceptance of the vaccines is crucial to end the global pandemic. But convincing the population entirely has seemingly been an uphill battle. Minister of Local Government and Community Development, Desmond McKenzie, says the inoculation exercise will be extended.
The vaccination exercise that you started in the corporate area will be replicated right across every parish over the next couple of weeks. That will speak to the homeless population.
Robian Williams for CVM Live.
Still on the regional scene, Brazil's Supreme Court is expected to deliver a landmark ruling on tribal lands later today. Thousands of indigenous people have set up a protest camp in Brasilia. The ruling could reopen past cases that have allowed commercial farming and mining in the Amazon rainforest and eventually lead to the return of land to indigenous people. Al Jazeera's Monica Yanikev reports.
They've come from all over the country, wearing the beads and feathers of 170 different indigenous groups, more than half of those in Brazil, chanting and praying, each in their own language, in the hope the Supreme Court will hear their voices. It's the largest indigenous gathering in the capital, Brasilia, since 1988. That's when the country's democratic constitution was approved, giving native Brazilians the right to reclaim ancestral lands. But they're back again, fearing those rights will be curtailed. This week, the Supreme Court is expected to make its ruling.
It's a land dispute between the Shoklang people who reclaimed their territories in the southern state of Santa Catarina and big landowners who say they have no rights because they weren't occupying those lands in 1988 when the Constitution was approved. It'll set a jurisprudence for hundreds of their pending cases.
The Shokland chieftain says setting a time limit is unconstitutional and unfair.
We weren't living in our lands in 1988 because had we stayed there, we'd have been exterminated. We've been hunted down by the landowners. They put a price on us. They pay people to kill us and ask them to bring our ears as proof.
Brazil's indigenous groups have forever been at risk from land grabs, illegal mining and logging. And they say attacks have increased since Jair Bolsonaro became president, with him promising to stop creating reservations and further exploit the Amazon rainforest. They're hoping the Supreme Court ruling will protect them.
It's a race against time. Meanwhile, in Congress, the powerful farm lobby and President Jair Bolsonaro himself are pushing a bill that will allow commercial agriculture and mining in protected indigenous lands. Monica Yanakiev, Al Jazeera, Brasilia.
Internationally, the Taliban says it will not extend the August 31 deadline for foreign forces to evacuate American citizens and Afghans the U.S. has worked with from Kabul airport. But Western countries warn the mission cannot be accomplished by the date given. Speaking at a news conference in the capital Kabul on Tuesday, Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid told the U.S. to stop taking skilled Afghans out of the country. Al Jazeera's Charles Stratsford reports.
The US President says the August the 31st deadline still stands.
We are currently on a pace to finish by August the 31st. The sooner we can finish, the better. Each day of operations brings added risk to our troops. But the completion by August 31st depends upon the Taliban continuing to cooperate and allow access to the airport for those who were transporting out, and no disruptions to our operations.
Military aircraft continue to take off from Kabul airport. It's a 24-hour operation. On board, some of the tens of thousands of people who have been evacuated since the Taliban seized power on August the 15th. But it's estimated tens of thousands more are desperate to leave. Despite pressure from governments around the world, and before the US President made his statement, the Taliban reiterated there would be no extension of the August the 31st deadline for the remaining NATO soldiers in Afghanistan to get out.
We will not allow an extension beyond August 31st, so the US should remove and evacuate all personnel by the set deadline.
Mujahid said the Taliban is stopping Afghans from going to the airport.
The Islamic Emirate is trying to encourage people to go home, but the Americans are inviting people to go to the airport. Their adverse policy of continuing to board people on planes. The airport access route has been closed to avoid stampedes.
The UN's top human rights official told an emergency session of the UN Human Rights Council she has received credible reports of the Taliban committing serious violations, including summary executions of civilians and restrictions on women.
A fundamental red line will be the Taliban's treatment of women and girls, and respect for their rights to liberty, freedom of movement, education, self-expression and employment, guided by international human rights norms. In particular, ensuring access to quality secondary education for girls will be an essential indicator of commitment to human rights.
The Taliban spokesman said women should, for the time being, stay at home because Taliban fighters were not yet trained on how to behave. With no extension of the August the 31st deadline, there are mounting concerns for tens of thousands of Afghans that want to leave this country. The Taliban says they have nothing to fear and that there will be no reprisals against people who have worked with NATO, foreign organisations or the media in the past. But trusting the Taliban on the basis of their words alone is something that many Afghans and the international community find very difficult to do. Charles Strafford, Al Jazeera, Kabul.
And now for the weather. Present weather is cloudy. The temperature is 31 degrees Celsius or 88 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds are a gentle breeze of 8 miles per hour from the east. Seas are moderate with waves not exceeding 5 feet. The weather forecast for today will be mostly sunny and hazy. Tonight will be mostly fair and hazy. Sunset today will be at 6:30 p.m. Sunrise tomorrow at 5:56 a.m. And that brings us to the end of the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Join us this evening for these stories and more in detail. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Jason Davis.